Hey guys! Today I'm going to show you how I made my Talon Widowmaker costume. And I'm so excited, so let's get started. First, I made a pattern for the shirt out of masking tape. I used tissue paper on the back of it so it isn't sticky. After I'm happy with the shape of the pattern, I trace on where the seams and detailing will be. I only do half because you can copy this for both sides. It also helps make a little map of your pieces and number or name them so you don't lose track of where they go once you cut them. Yes, it may no longer look like a shirt, but it makes it possible to trace onto fabric and sew it back together. Here's the pieces all pinned together. I used a white stretch fabric from the Yaya Han Cosplay Fabric line. Once I finished sewing it, I add black detailing to the shirt with bias tape. To hold the structure, I used craft foam underneath the shoulder and chest area. Here's the underside of the shirt where you can see the craft foam I added. And that's how the shoulder stays stiff and holds its shape. Next, I start to make another pattern out of tape, and this is for the chest armor. I have a template for the front of the chest plate available for download on my website. The link is in the description. While looking at reference photos, I carefully trace out the shape I need for the armor. When I'm happy with the shape, I trace it onto paper and draw the details. I trace the details onto craft foam and glue them onto more craft foam. Then I cut around the pieces I just glued down and leave a little extra space around them for the edge. Then I take the two pieces I just cut out and add them to a piece of poster board cut in the base shape to make the foam more durable. I glue down the foam with hot glue, then add all the little details. I use Sharpie markers and pens to make indentations and defined edges in the foam, and cut along the edges of the foam to remove any poster board from showing. Then I take a piece of black craft foam in the base shape and poke holes in it with the hole puncher. Once there are places I can't reach with the hole puncher, I cut little slits in the parts that won't show up to give myself a way to reach them. Then I glue the two pieces together. These are the back pieces of armor I made the same way I did as the front. And now it's time to attach them all together. I trace a line on the bottom side of the foam for an edge that needs to be raised. After I trace the line, I apply hot glue to the line, then fold and pinch it until it cools. This helps create a defined edge in the craft foam. Here you see what it does. I actually do this for a lot of pieces on the back. Yes, it does take extra effort, but it's not hard to do and it adds a lot more definition to your armor. When I'm happy with all the details in the pieces, I glue it onto poster board. I curl some of the edges while I glue so it's curved around my ribs and shoulders. Then I start gluing on all the little details. Be careful not to add hot glue to the pinched edges or else it might get rid of the details you made earlier. Then I cut off any excess poster board. And then I attach the front to the back. Here's the armor pieces before it's painted. To paint it, first I coated it in clear spray Mod Podge, then used Rust-Oleum spray paint in black for the base coat. Then I hand painted all the detailing in other colors. I painted some of the armor a dark gunmetal color and then edged it with a silver paint marker. This really helps the armor look defined and animated. It also helps it look more like metal and makes it look so much better in photos. I looked at reference photos to check out what colors go where and carefully edged the crevices in black. After I'm done painting the chest armor, I move on to the little armor pieces. These are the armbands that attach around the shirt. I trace them onto craft foam, cut them out, glue them to poster board, and paint them. I use the same technique I do for the chest plate I just showed you how to make. Here's the armor all painted and finished. Also, the collar of the shirt is made out of craft foam as well. All I did was cut the shape onto some thicker craft foam, paint some details, and glue it to the shirt. I added the straps to the front by just cutting strips of craft foam, covering them in fabric, and gluing them onto the armor. The side of the chest armor velcros together on one side so I can get in and out of it, and the armbands are glued to the sleeves. I added some velcro to the outside of the underbust of the shirt and the inside of the armor so it doesn't move around and I don't have to adjust it all day while wearing it. For the pants, I use a really basic pajama pant pattern. Anything that is slightly loose fitted and easy to make should work. Here are the pants after I sew them using the gray stretch fabric from the Yaya Han Cosplay Fabric line. To add thickness to the pants, I actually sewed them over and onto an old pair of sweatpants I had. Her pants just don't really seem thin in the game, so I wanted to make sure I recreated that thickness. I made patterns for the little details on the pants and began cutting them out. Then I started marking where I wanted holes in the panels. If you want, you can measure the spacing between each dot to make sure it's perfect. But I was pretty happy with the way it turned out just by eyeballing it. Then I used the hole puncher again to poke some holes in the fabric. For the hard to reach places, I fold the fabric in half on the dots and poke half a circle so when you unfold it, it's a full circle. Then I pinned it to a darker fabric from the Yaya Han Cosplay Fabric line so the holes appear darker. And I cut off the edges and lined them with black bias tape. I also pinned bias tape to the front and back of the pants to recreate the details on her pants in the game and then sew everything on. Here are the pants with all the details sewed on. Her pants seem to be two different tones of gray, a lighter gray on top and darker gray on the bottom. I already have the right darker shade of gray for the bottom, so I made the entire pants out of it because I couldn't find a lighter gray in the right color. So if you find the right color fabric for both shades, you can just sew them together. But since I'm sort of a perfectionist with shades and had no luck finding the right one, I decided to just paint it with acrylic craft paint. I did this by mixing craft paints into the color I wanted, then mixing them with water so they wouldn't be too thick. Then I carefully brushed onto the pants in the areas I wanted it. For the armor pieces on her hips, I glued layers of thick craft foam together. Cut the edges to make them smooth. Then took strips of thin craft foam and glued them to the sides to hide the seams. I cut off any of the edges that came out too far to clean it up. I also made a bunch of other details that I needed to add to the pants and shirt. These little armor details are for the leg pouches she has. I made them the same way as the rest of the armor was made in this video. Craft foam glued onto poster board, then detailed and painted. The paint job is pretty important to make the metal more convincing. For the leg pouch, I just used a piece of foam used for floor mats and cut it into the size I needed. I used a heat gun to curve it, then I used hot glue to glue fabric over it to make it look like a bag. First, I covered the edges, then I cut a strip of fabric and glued it over the front. I also added a flap over that and painted on some details and weathering. Then I glued the pouch to the little armor pieces and added straps to those. It may not be functioning, but it does look good. I also sewed velcro onto the pants and glued it onto the back of the pouch to make sure it didn't slide down my leg. I also glued the other details onto the pants. And added straps I made out of craft foam covered in fabric and sewed them around the sides of the pants and over the crotch. Now let's move on to the bracer. I make a pattern for the bracer out of paper and make it a similar way I do for all the other armor pieces. I use the paper pattern to mark the indentations in the foam so I know where to put the details. I use a pen and X-Acto knife to carve out the details. If you press pens and markers firmly onto the foam, it creates an indentation while you trace it. You can also use a knife and Dremel tools, but this is so much easier and cheaper and everyone has them. I start cutting little pieces of foam to add more structure to the bracer. I also use a shiny piece of red paper and cover it in a clear piece of plastic I folded to the right shape. I used clear plastic so it was possible to put lights in it. I ended up going with something I prefer way over lights, but we'll get to that in a bit. I start gluing on the little pieces of foam. It's so crazy how just adding a few simple shapes on top make it look so much more detailed. Then I cut a rough strip of foam and heat up a hot glue stick. Then I roll the sticky warm glue stick on the foam. Super simple, but creates a very useful shape. I make 2 of these, then cut off some of the hot glue stick. Then I take a pen to make an indentation around the tube. Here are the finished pieces. Then I just stick them on the bracer, but before I secure them, I need to add more detailing. I cut a shape of the foam for around the top of the bracer. I want it to look really structured like this, so I do the same thing I did with the back armor. I create lines with hot glue and then fold and pinch them until they cool in the shape I want. This is a very useful trick and it makes such a big difference. After I do that, it's time to add the little tubes on top and glue them on. I take a little cap from an Elmer's glue stick and cut it in half, then use it for a tube that comes out from underneath the bracer. The more details, the better. Once you're happy with how it looks, it's time to paint it. I sealed it with Mod Podge, then coated it in black and another coat of silver Rust-Oleum spray paint. A lot of Overwatch armor has a gradient effect, so I recreate that by mixing black and silver acrylic craft paint and painting it on the bracer. I also weathered the entire bracer. Then I painted the plastic area red, and this worked good. But if you want to do something even brighter, you can use a reflective safety tape from a hardware store and put that on instead. I prefer this over lights because it's so vivid, shows up in all lighting, and the power never runs out. But you can do it any way you feel most comfortable. I'm sure it will turn out great. For the gloves, first I put on thick gloves to keep my hand from burning. And I just got a cheap pair of black gloves on Amazon or eBay and glued some details on the knuckles. And I painted the top half of the gloves gray to give them that two-tone look they have in the game. Then I just cut a rectangle piece of craft foam, attached it to poster board, and glued it to the glove. And it worked out pretty darn well. For the leg armor, I did the same thing as the rest of the armor. You make a pattern, cut it out, trace it onto craft foam, and trace the base onto poster board. For more structured shapes like this knee piece, I folded some pieces of poster board and glued them to the shape to hold the structure together. Then I just glued the base made out of poster board onto craft foam and cut the craft foam into shape while gluing it on. And here's the little knee pieces all put together. I used some popsicle sticks to make sure the leg armor doesn't lose its shape and stay stiff and doesn't bend. I just glue them to the inside of the poster board. When it's all glued together, I add some detailing by cutting thin strips of craft foam and gluing them onto the seam. With a thicker foam, I cut more little details and used my scissors to slant the edges. Then I glue on my knee pieces. And then I add all the little details to the rest of the leg armor. Then I begin the painting process with spray paint and finish it by weathering it with acrylics. I also paint the knee piece off-white. And finish the rest of the detailing to the leg armor. Now, I would love to show you how I made the wig, but sadly the files got corrupted and I lost them, so I'll just try to talk you through it the best I can. This was a cheap wig I got on eBay and cut all the hair off and re-glued it back on with hot glue. I actually have a pattern on my website available for download for the visor. And I secured this little piece of hair to it with glue so it didn't move around. Since it was a cheap wig, it didn't really fit my head right, so I extended it with fabric and hot glued strips of hair onto that to create a fake hairline. Because of the glue, the wig holds its shape almost like a helmet, which I think is pretty awesome because the hair never gets messed up. On the top, I added a bump of foam underneath the hair to add more shape. And I did the same thing for the ponytail to add volume by inserting foam under the hair. The styling products I used were got2b spray and gel. And that's pretty much how I made the wig. I do have other tutorials showing how I make updo wigs, so I suggest checking those out for a better look. This incredible 3D printed Talon Widowmaker gun was made by Tabbitha Workshop. It was so nice working with them, and they were so quick and understanding, and I love the gun so much. It's just perfect and durable, and every detail is there. I couldn't be more happy with this gun. I just love it. I'm pretty sure they finished some pieces themselves, but I requested to paint it myself, so here's how I did that. First, I just started it in a solid coat of black spray paint. Then I painted all of the off-white parts. Then I painted all of the silver parts. And I edged all of the silver parts with a silver Sharpie marker to define them more. After that, I used my handy reflective safety tape and cut them into tiny shapes I need. Then I glued them into place. And that's pretty much it for the gun. I am just so in love with this. I will be adding links to Tabbitha Workshop's website in the description below. Hope you found this tutorial helpful. Even if you're not planning to make a Talon Widowmaker costume, maybe this helps you learn some new techniques for a different cosplay. I have a makeup tutorial for this look on my channel, as well as plenty of other cosplay tutorials. Huge shout out to my patrons for their support so I can continue making these tutorials. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Bye!